All right, g'day, hi and well. Bah. G'day. Learn how to speak, take two. G'day, hi and welcome. Okay, so yes, I'm in my jammies. I want to talk about a boot. You don't need extreme detail here, so I know the lighting's bad because of backlit, whatever. But it's kind of windy out here, so I'll keep the camera in there. But the tree falling saw. What makes a good tree falling saw? I got three saws here just to show you. These are a Johnsert. I don't know exactly what model that is because it's, I call it the Husky Johnsert. It's my dad's saw. I think it's 54 cc's. Don't quote me. It's between 50 and 54 cc's. A very old saw. Thing's probably almost 50 years old like me. Well, maybe not quite that, but it's probably over 40 anyway. And then you got the MS270 and the MS260, right? Okay, little older saws. But what makes a good falling saw and what makes a good lumber saw or milling saw or whatever? Well, the one way to look at it is, I'll grab my dad's big beast here. This thing is 18 pounds with fuel and everything. So if I got this saw and I'm coming down like that, it's a heavy saw. I don't want to work with that all day, But it's not bad because you can see with the 20-inch bar, even though it's a heavy saw, it's not too bad. I can kind of rest it on me like that. But more important, if I'm going to plunge into a tree, look at how level that sits, right? That's pretty good. But it's so freaking bloody heavy, right? If I go down to my MS270, 16-inch bar, okay, so maybe with the 20 it might sit a little bit like that. But again, a lot lighter than that, I think by about 2 pounds almost. And again, no problem, especially, you're down here trying to put that in the tree, right? And that makes a good falling saw. MS260, even lighter, 16-inch bar. Maybe not as much power, but whatever. So, turn it sideways. Man, that thing's sweet. You can see, tips up just a bit. So I could probably go with a slightly heavier bar with this, but it's almost a neutral balance there from my hand. So if you got a bar and you're down like this, you're fighting the saw like this, right? You don't want to do that. It's nice to be able to just anchor yourself like that. Maybe off to the side a bit, so if it does kick back, it kicks away from you. So however you're going to be in there, I know I look a little funny, but just imagine the bars in the tree right now. So I'm sighting down my sighter here. Okay, so I'm probably about here by the time the saw is all the way in, or I have to go this side, for the whatever. Usually if you have a wraparound handle, you can do that. So what I want for that kind of a saw, for a falling saw, is a saw like this saw is probably a little bit better for falling than that one. This handle's just a little bit taller, right? And it just seems like it's easier to hang on to it. And not only that, if I'm starting my plunge cut down here, okay, we're going to be doing it. So maybe I'll be like this. Pray it doesn't. No problem, right? So this saw's a good in between this saw, which weighs a ton, but has enough weight back here that you can get away with the 20-inch bar. So a heavier saw sometimes is better for falling because of that, right? It's about the balance of them. And something I'm hearing about some of the bigger saws that are on the market that are really popular right now is that they're rocket ships for cutting. Like the 260, that thing, you wind it out like it winds up really high, and that's why people love them, right? The 261, the same thing. Although the 260 has some slightly nicer design features over the 261. But if I ever get a 261 to compare it to, I'll show you what I mean. I'm looking at my 270 as the falling saw. Now, would I put a 20-inch bar on it? I don't know. If I put a 20-inch bar on there and I can get away with it, I would do it. But if I found that the saw I had to manipulate the tip too much, and if I was obviously losing too much power from a longer bar for plunging, then I might not, I might want a saw that's actually heavier, like the Johnsert here. So maybe I can put a 24-inch bar on there and still plunge. You know what I mean? And still sit fairly level. So a lot of people don't, most people thinking of the saws up and down like this, they don't think of them sideways. And if you're going to test out a saw in the store or whatever, like maybe not test it out by running it, but make sure you grab it by the side handle and, look at your spaces between here and here, here and here. This is just ever so slightly higher. They're the same saw, but not the same saw, This one, probably in between this and this. So this one has, I think, the nicest handle. And, just the gap just seems a little bit more forward, more whatever. If you put the saws side by side, it's hard to tell, but it does feel like this handle has a better balance point out of the two, out of these two. But that one seems to have, because of the more weight there, seems to have a better balance level like this, just because it's a heavier counterbalance. So it allows you, again, if you have too small of a bar, if you put a 16-inch bar in, the tip might be up and that might throw you off. If you had maybe a 24-inch bar, it might dive. So that's something, if you can get away with the shorter bar to get through your tree, that's more balanced, that's the better way to go. So even the big powerhouse saws that are out there might not necessarily be as good as you think for falling trees. And I've been hearing that about, so I don't want to say exactly which saws, because internet argument, thing, or you don't know what you're talking about, blah, blah. But yeah, you do. When you do a plunge, I haven't done a lot of, I'll be honest with you, I haven't plunged a lot of trees, with that cutting method, because I haven't required it that much. But I have done it a couple of times, and the first time you do it, it's kind of a weird, it just is really weird. It's a bit nerving the first time you do it because of, you're afraid of the kickback. But plunging a tree tells you a lot about the tree, if it's rotten in the center or whatever. But one of the things is that your falling saw is not the same as your, stove wood saw, the stuff cutting like this. Stuff like this just got to be as fast as it can be. It doesn't matter. But once you start turning the saw sideways, you're starting to put side load on it. Things function different. Some saws are really flimsy. Some saws are really stiff. You know what I mean? Like that saw is like stiff as hell, but which makes it a good falling saw, even if it's not the biggest CC. So I'd look for that even over how powerful the saw is. A saw that can go completely precisely in, and if you have to go in from this side and then go in from the other side, if you have a tree that big, the more precise you can be with the saw, the better balance the saw, the easier it is to do that. If not, you're going to be missing and everything like that, and then messes up your cut. So just something to consider. A lot of guys don't think about that. They just look at the specs on the sheet, and you don't notice it as much as in these mid-range saws, probably as much, but you'll notice it on the little saws, because the little saws usually are flimsy to begin with. They're not really meant for, plunging into trees and stuff like that. Maybe small trees, but even at that, they'll probably, worm around on you a bit. And the really heavy saws, that's where people are like, okay, this is such a good falling saw, and they don't know why it's so good for falling, but that's what it is. It's that balance, right? So, it's not diving down every time you go to do a plunge. Yeah, it's heavy this way, but the better balance your saw is, the more neutral of a feel it has, it can actually make a heavier saw feel lighter. So, yeah. So I guess I'll leave it at about that. I think that's probably, hopefully, enough explanation. So a falling saw versus a blocking, a milling saw or a bucking saw, two different. Like, again, if you're, like a tree limbing saw, like if you could put a 36-inch bar on the MS260 and keep it, under 15 pounds, that would be the ultimate limbing saw, because it's nice and light, right? The MS260 to me is the saw that does everything. It's the saw that does, it limbs, it bucks, it falls, it does everything well. Hence why people love it. They don't know why they love it. They think it's just because it's a snappy little saw, which it is. But it's all those other things. Like it's not super, super flimsy. I mean, yeah, you're going to get the guy bending they'll all do that. Like, there's got to be some give to your saw, or else you're just going to break things. It would become very dangerous if it didn't flex at all, right? But what I'm getting at is that if you get the right bar combination, right? Like you can throw a 42-inch bar on this thing. It doesn't mean it's going to work right, right? So that's why you select different saws. You know, a bigger saw can run a bigger bar and stiffer, typically, right? So if it can't run that bar stiffer, then that bar's just too big for that saw. That simple. Like I say, straight up and down don't matter. When you turn the saw sideways and you got to go through a tree, trust me, it matters. It matters. So hopefully that, you know, hopefully that's something that, you know, food for thought. A lot of people don't think about those things when it comes to saws and stuff. So there you go.